Hi. Real estate agents have been ranked the third least trusted industry professionals, just ahead of car salesmen and advertising people, even below union bosses and politicians. Now, that sentiment has a really big impact on our ability to build a solid business. If you don't have the credibility at the start, then you're going to be working with one hand tied behind your back. Credibility, trust, and rapport are the cornerstones to a really good business, any business. To be successful and stand above this stigma about real estate agents or real estate brokers generally, you've got to focus on your activities. You can't change the industry image, but you can do something about how you operate. My guest in this series is Corah. Marcus emigrated from the UK in late 2017, where he'd worked as a trainer and coach, specialising in selling, pitching, and influencing. He's worked with Google, Unilever, KLM, ABN AMRO, and many other leading companies around the world. He now lives in Melbourne, where he's working with many leading companies and top real estate agents and brokers, helping them build better, more sustainable businesses with NLP techniques. NLP, well, that's another discussion. Today, I want to start with trust. Marcus, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. It's great to be here and have a chance to chat to you.
I'm looking forward to our chats. It's a very interesting area. Marcus, I've heard you say that there is no cookie cutter approach to building trust. And that's the core of our conversation. How do we start that relationship?
Okay, so let me step back and say why there's not a cookie cutter approach. For me, when you talk to sellers, when you talk to buyers, everybody's unique, everybody's different. And I think if you treat them all the same, then it doesn't help to create that bond of trust, which is obviously what rapport is all about. So there's a really brilliant American sort of business guru called Brian Tracy. And a long time ago, I listened to some of his CDs. And one of the things he talked about was this idea of if you're focusing on what you get out of the deal, the focus is in the wrong place, because it's not about you, it's only about them. So for me, when we interact with other people, if we put our focus on what they want to achieve from that conversation, it really helps to build a deeper bond of trust than just kind of going, hey, aren't we awesome? Thanks for having me in your home, all that kind of stuff. So I think the first step of really building rapport is just your own mindset. Are you going in there to sell, or are you going in there to help them achieve what they want? And off the back of that, then obviously there are lots of other little things that you can do. But I think for me, the start is definitely your mindset. And if you go in with that mindset and that kind of quizzical mindset, then it creates a different kind of relationship off the bat as soon as you interact with somebody. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, that is such a really good point that you make, and I think that's obviously the logical starting point. I think sometimes we do get caught up too much in the sell, like you've got to close all the time, as opposed to taking a genuine interest in someone, getting to know them. Someone once said to me that it's not so much knowing the answers, it's all about knowing what questions to ask. It's the most powerful part of any conversation.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that the questioning strategies that you use and you go in with are informed by that mindset of, how do I understand more about you? How can I help you on your journey? How can I help you as a buyer or as a seller fulfill what you're looking to fulfill? Because it makes such a difference in your connection. And obviously the questions that you then ask feed off that mindset, rather than I'm here to sell you. Because if you're there to sell, then I think you all look the same and the trust just breaks down. I mean, how many times do we get cold calls from people going, hey, we're, whatever, we're an insurance company, we're a phone company, we're a this, we're a that. And you just get called, and the first thing the person does is start telling you how marvelous their features are, and you're being sold. They're not interested in you per se. They're interested in making the calls, making the numbers, and doing all of the stuff, right? And so for me, when you come with that different mindset, it just opens up that bond of trust as a starting point, because you'll ask better questions, different questions, because you actually want to help them on their journey.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. To hear you describe it that way just makes so much sense. So you talk about three principles. You say identifying the hot buttons, linking features, and delivering a very clear message. Can I just talk about the first one, and that is understanding those emotional drivers. Marcus, how do we uncover those?
So the emotional desire, if you think about it, let's talk about from a buyer's perspective, just as an example, okay? Nobody's really buying a box within a box. In the same way that the car that you drive represents an emotional desire that you're trying to fulfill, we're not buying a home because it's a box within a box. We're buying a home because it fulfills some kind of emotional desire in us as an individual. And basically, I've broken the emotional desires down into four categories as a starting point, and they're by no means the sort of Bible of these categories. It was just a starting point to talk to agents about. And the categories are: we're buying for some kind of status improvement to improve our status. Let's say you're a business owner, you have an amazing year, you absolutely smash it, and you want to upgrade your home. That's totally normal, right? We're all in those sort of categories. Then the next level down, or the next level along, is we buy for opportunity. The opportunity to start again, maybe we're getting divorced, or the opportunity to develop a piece of land or a property so that we can make more money, the opportunity to put our kids into a better school, whatever it happens to be, we're looking to fulfill an opportunity. The other types of categories that these might fall into are love and connection. How many times as agents have we sold a property because somebody wants to move closer to a relative or to friends or to an elderly person? Okay, it happens a lot. And then finally, just peace of mind, peace and quiet. I mean, if you live in central Melbourne, we lived literally in London for 20 odd years. And at the end, we're like, we've got to move out. We've got to get some peace and quiet here. And we ended up on Bayside in Melbourne. So we're looking to fulfill.
That's a pretty big move.
It was actually a very, very big move. And it comes with its own set of challenges, I can tell you, Kevin.
Yeah.
And the thing is, though, is we were looking to fulfill some kind of emotional desire. And there are questions that you can ask that allow you to unlock those desires. But at the end of the day, you have to start exploring, and you have to go in with that quizzical mindset. And that all starts coming back full circle with your own mindset, and you walking into that relationship going, so what do you want from this? Where do you want to go? What's your dream life look like?
So they're the questions that you open up with to bring on those emotional desires, isn't it? So at what point do you move to the next level, which I think is linking features to those emotional drivers? When do you know you've got enough?
Basically, the way that I tend to operate is I will elicit the emotional desires that the buyer or the seller is trying to fulfill. And then what I'm going to do is I have to understand what that means specifically to that person. Because here's the next thing that happens. When we hear an emotional desire, I'm going to talk about something that's unrelated to real estate because it's one of the first times where I actually use this technique. It was a private equity head of sort of investor relations. And this guy, I listed his emotional desires about getting some sales training. And he basically turned around and he said, I want my team to be able to effortlessly raise money. Now, I have no idea what I need to do in the context of delivering training for me to be able to meet that emotional desire that he's after fulfilling. So I then have to understand, how do those emotional desires that buyer, that seller is trying to fulfill, how do they need those to be met? Because here's what happens. The moment where I go, do you know what, when that investor relations PE guy basically said, I want my team to be able to effortlessly raise money, I could have gone, I'll help his team to be rich. That's me going, here's my version of reality.
That's right. Yeah.
You just hold my version of reality and we'll see if it matches. And of course it doesn't. No. Because it doesn't fire off the same things in his head. So I have to go back and I have to go, look, this is how I can help you and your team to effortlessly raise money in the context of sales training. And when I have that conversation with him, which I did, he was listening, he was engaged, he wanted to hear all about it. And the point was, and I think from an agent's perspective, this is really super important. It helps me to differentiate myself from all of the other trainers out there, because most of the other trainers go out and they go, here are my features. Mm-hmm. If you want sales training, here are the things you need to have. And it just becomes, coming back to your very earliest question, a cookie cutter approach to engaging and selling and connecting with people. And we've got to get away from this sort of one size fits all. I'm different to every other individual on this planet. You know, there are whatever, 7, 8 billion of us right now. I'm different. I've had the same, we all live on the same rock, but I've had different experiences. The things that I'm trying to fulfill in my life are different, and what they mean to me are different as well. So we can't go in with the one size fits all approach to sell, because you're not me and I'm not you. And if I want to sell to you, I have to understand you and how you do what you do and what you want to achieve.
Walk a mile in my shoes. It's quite amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really what
but it's easy to. It's easy not to do that. Yeah. And it's easier not to do that because the one thing that we know as salespeople is our features. The one thing that we have down pat that's easy to talk about again and again and again are our features.
Yeah.
The hardest.
Yeah, but they're the same features as everyone else has got. And therein lies the problem.
Right. Absolutely correct.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you a quick story. I was working with an agent and he was writing a CMA. And I'd gone to him and he said, Marcus, look, can you help me shape it so that it's different? And I'm like, of course, I'd love to. And I got this fabulous email back and it really made me smile. He spent a few hours on this CMA because I'd gone, right, this is what we're not doing. We're not going to go in. We're not going to talk about, this was for a developer. We're not going to talk about too much about the area. We're going to talk about his emotional desires. We're going to talk about how we can meet those emotional desires, who his ideal buyers are, and all of that kind of stuff. So we created a very different type of report. And he sent me an email literally a day later. And he goes, I hope this is okay. It made my brain hurt. Why? Because it wasn't the standard fare that he was used to writing.
That's right.
But, sorry, Kevin, he got a report back from the developer that the developer actually sat down and read every word.
Yeah.
Connected with it.
That's right, exactly.
It was different.
You know, one of the reasons I think we don't do that is because we don't listen. You know, those, like we all sort of, we're taught to ask those kind of questions. Tell us what you're doing, where you're going, what are you looking to achieve? Because we think that's part of the process. But if we really listen, that's when we can pick up on all of those emotional desires and then lock them into how we can actually use them. So I think a lot of it comes down to listening as well. Can I just move to the final part of this? Because it's a fascinating conversation, Marcus, and thank you. And that is the message, the delivery of the message. Now, at this point, do we sort of take a step back and say, okay, well, here's what I've asked you, here's what you've told me, here's what I now understand. Tell me if I'm right. I'm going to feed it back to you. And this is where we effectively say, hey, I've listened and I understand. Is that right?
Yeah. So absolutely. It seems really counterintuitive to use someone's exact words back to them. Let me give you the first time I ever sort of built rapport as a process. I was working in an architectural firm as a director, as in Lights, Camera, Action. And one of the senior partners came up to me and said, Marcus, I need to take you to lunch. I've got an issue. I want to talk to you about it. I'm like, sure, great. This is how I built rapport with him. Most agents out there, I'm pretty sure, are familiar with the idea of matching and mirroring. So you do a movement, I wait a bit of time, I do a movement that represents a sort of mirror image or a match to what you've just done. So I did two things. Every time I saw this senior architect put his elbow on the table during lunch, I just put my elbow on the table during lunch. And every time he took his elbow off, this is very junior rapport building, right? Every time I took my elbow off, his elbow off, I took my elbow off. So that was the extent of that half. Now, really interestingly, I only did one other thing. The only other thing I did was when he had finished talking, I said to him, just so I'm clear, did you say this?
Yes,
And I
right.
just repeated back what he had told me. Now, in that moment, I'm demonstrating that, to your point, I've listened.
That's right.
I've been present in the conversation. I've been engaged with you. I've understood what you've said, and I just want to clarify that this is actually what you said and what you meant by what you said.
Active
and
listening.
Yes, absolutely. It's so simple, right? The impact on him was massive. We walked out of that lunch and he turned round literally on the way back to the office and he said, Marcus, it really feels like you're one of the few people that gets me. And in that moment, I went, wow, this stuff's amazing. I can't believe how happened.
Can I just tell you a story now? And that's about, what I do, which is interviewing. And quite often when I do it, people will say to me, can you send me a script? Can you send me the questions? I quite often have to do that because otherwise they won't do the interview. But invariably what happens is that I end up throwing the script away in some ways, like what I've done right here. Because if I'm not listening to you, I'm not actually going to be able to ask the questions that I think people want to hear. So it's a fascinating area to be in, but I'm just a great believer in active listening, and I think if we can get into that mode, you're going to become a lot more valuable at what you do, and you become a lot better communicator. That's my belief.
100%. So I think there are elements to listening which I'd like to just touch on, if that's okay, a bit of content. So there are three types of listening that we do. We do light listening, and light listening is really where we're listening to part of the conversation and then we disengage to kind of find an answer. And so I've kind of been present for a little bit. It's like predictive texting, right? You know what you're going to end up saying, and so that's fine. The problem is then it dishonors the person you're sitting opposite or talking to. The next level is dialogue listening, where we actually listen to the whole dialogue before we start formulating our answer. And that's obviously a big step forward and a really useful level to have. But the final is empathetic listening. And empathetic listening is not only where you're listening to the dialogue, but you're watching the body language as well. Because when people do the fold their arms and sit back, you need to be aware of what you're shifting them, what state you're shifting them in and out of, or when they uncross their arms and lean in, so that you're totally present with them and you can see the impact of your communication and all your questions. I mean, if you ask a really tough question, it's the old thing when we move away from a problem, we get out of the way of a car coming towards us, right? And we do the same when we're in a meeting or we're in a conversation. We sit back and go, whoa, that's a difficult question. And you kind of sit back and you kind of maybe cross your arms and you go, I'm not sure I want to answer that. So we've got to have the acuity to be able to either tonally, in an interview situation where you might not see them, so whether you're on the phone or not, or whether you're actually there in person, you're going to have the acuity to see and to hear what's going on, because the combination gives you the power to go, wow, because it's not what I think I said, it's your interpretation of what I've said that's really important in this conversation.
Marcus, we are out of time, but before I go, I just want to ask you about the Real Influencers Masterclass. How does that work? Tell us about that.
So the Real Influencers I created because I met an agent who went, that was fascinating conversation. Can you put it online? Can we learn from you? So I ended up creating a day that him and a few other agents came to down in Melbourne. And from that, we created a course. And the Real Influencers Masterclass basically is the online version of my sort of best content that I've ever created as a trainer over the last 10, 15 years. So it's just an online platform where you can get all of the rapport building, emotional desires content, and the objection handling content.
Okay, well, we're going to be talking to Marcus on a reasonably regular basis through Property TV and also through RE Uncut. So make sure you follow that. And Marcus, just give us, and we'll super it up on the screen here too, but just give us the website address to go to if people want to reach you and talk more about what you do.
So realinfluencers.com.au.
It's
super simple.
Yep, realinfluencers.com.au. We'll just super that up there for you now. Hey Marcus, great talking to you. Look forward to talking in our next episode. Not quite sure what that'll be about yet, but I'll do a bit more research and we'll come back with a few key topics. And by the way, too, if you're watching this and you'd like something specific covered with Marcus, he's a wonderful font of information, just send me an email, kevin@realestatetalk.com.au, or reach me through Property TV, and we'll certainly pose those questions. I think it'd be great to get some feedback from the audience because we are listening. We are listening to you and we want your questions. Hey, Marcus, good on you, my friend. Great talking to you. Thank you very much. And that website again is realinfluencers.com.au. Marcus, thanks for your time.
Pleasure, Kevin. Thank you. Awesome to chat to you.